right, good afternoon, everyone. In Jamaican schools, that means we have to say good afternoon back. So,
good afternoon.
Excellent, Irie, as we say in Jamaica. So my presentation is about escaping the labyrinth of poverty and how we can harness technology to change the low-income students and what it's like for them at college. I'm going to start with a quick story about myself, and you'll see how it brushes back to the end. When I was, my mother, who's Jamaican, met my father, who's Irish, in Jamaica in the 1950s. They had a very typical Irish-Jamaican wedding, shillelaghs and ska put together into one. So we were raised there, my sister and I, and then when it was time for college, my chemistry teacher, a guidance counselor, suggested I go to a college in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, called Simon's Rock, tiny little school. So my mother flew over to Washington, D.C., where her sister lived, and then we took a bus up to Port Authority, Trailways, and then on to Pittsfield and onto the campus. I was a first-gen college student, but that was before there was first-gen, before we knew the term. My mother dropped me off. She was still there. I was playing Frisbee on the quad, trying to assimilate into this wholly new culture. And I saw her out of the corner of my eye. She was leaving. She was heading to a taxi cab because she wanted to let me figure it out myself. That moment is what a lot of us face, that moment of terror when you go to college about, I'm alone, this is me now. And that's particularly true of students of low income and of poverty and first-gen kids who don't have the parent to call on the phone and say, what's next and what do I do now? So I want to tell you a story about 3 different Petaluma High students where I work. Ty, Jackie, who's up there graduating, and Marisol. So first, Ty. Ty's a UCLA sophomore. He Facebooked last month after the college admission scandal how he felt marginalized at UCLA, how he felt that because he's a Filipino and because people were looking at him as if you got here for different reasons than I did or somebody else did. And that sense of being marginalized at a school like any school is something we need to do something more specifically about. This is Jackie, a student at Petaluma High, now at Cal Poly Pomona. And this is a short piece about what it was like for her to start college.
Ready.
I think what happened was when I was in high school, I felt like if I needed something, I knew exactly to what person to go to. And if I was stuck, let's say with a homework problem or something, I know what teachers I would go to. If I needed help, emotionally, I knew I could go to counselors. I knew, and they all knew me, on a name basis, and I had a relationship, established with them. At school, I felt, one, I'm first generation. So when I went to college, my parents dropped me off, they left, and I was like, so now what do I do with my life? What am I doing? It's a really big campus, and I felt like I didn't have a relationship with anybody, so I felt unsafe. And I felt because I'd see my roommates and they aren't first generation, and their parents would be like, oh, if you need help, go here or go there. I couldn't call my parents and be like, so I'm stuck with this, so where do I go, or what do you guys think I should do? Because they'll listen to me, but they don't know what to say because they've never been to college.
That sense that Jackie speaks about of being unsafe, I never thought that would be Jackie at college. I thought she was what we call a 5-tool collegian. She was effervescent, she's smart, she's connected, she's happy, joyous. I thought Jackie was going to cruise through college. But she came back when I saw her in that first year, back at homecoming at different times. Jackie she was going to drop out. She was going to leave. Then in her sophomore year, she managed to make a connection.
Made you develop this confidence, okay.
Honestly, I think a relationship with one of my professors who was like, if you need anything, I don't mind. I'm you need to have trust in someone. So if you need anything, if you can't afford a textbook, or if you can't this, or if you just don't know what class to take, or anything that you need, you can come to me. So I felt like establishing a relationship with him led me to have relationships with other professors, with the department chair, with my advisor, and then I just started building the same foundation that I had here, there, and I was like, I'm gonna do this.
So she learned that you had to just replicate the success of high school or something in her past at college. But college could have done that for her. She didn't need to spend a year and a half wondering whether she was the right fit. Neither did I. Asking the question of do we fit at college is a common one. They really accepted me? Do I belong here amongst all these so-called smart people? Jackie certainly does. So Jackie's story is she graduated last week from Cal Poly Pomona as a junior, and she's going on to get her JD there in the next 2 years. So she's fully launched, which is great for her. So Imagine going to your doctor and imagine that he or she did not have any idea about your medical history. That would be a deficit. You would expect him or her to know that. Imagine not knowing all the stuff about students that we know K-12. Millions of our students, we know deeply and intimately their story, but we don't capture their qualitative information. So I'm proposing a national student e-passport, which is sort of a capturing of all the anecdotes and triumphs along the way, a narrative of their life, a guidebook for college staff to work with on day one. Not just an orientation to college, but I know who you are because I'm using the data and values that the K-12 system learned about, and I'm transferring it to college in a digital, deep way. If there's any takeaway here, our inability to collect, collate, and curate qualitative data is damaging student progress, particularly those from low-income households whose parents simply do not have the tools and experience to navigate college. That's Jackie's experience. I think we all know that college retention rates are a national crisis. The National Student Clearinghouse reported that only 61% of students return for a second year at their starting institution. 4 in 10 kids are leaving. So what is college ready? I would submit college ready includes knowing more about our students when they get there and being visceral and doing something directly about it. Finally, I want to tell about Marisol. She is someone I know when she was born. She's now an 8th grader heading to Petaluma High next year. When her mother and she showed up for orientation last month, they were terrified of the big school, what this was going to be, a very scary place. Marisol is not necessarily as well equipped as Jackie was. She's going to need more data, more qualitative data to transfer her off to college with. It's our job to try to collect it. I think that the technology is available. If we can harness it, we can do this work and curate it carefully and move data along to our colleges. You know, when I buy a pack of gum, Google is on me a half an hour later to tell me where to buy another case. But in our case, in K-12, we're tossing away millions of students' data that we've collected over 13 years and leaving it and essentially saying it doesn't matter. I submit that it does. So we in K-12 have a good idea who our students are. Let's design and implement tools to help college know them better too. At the end of this presentation that's on there is my contact information, so if anyone is interested in following up, I'd be happy to talk more. Thanks very much.
Are we good to go? Yeah? Okay, cool. Cool. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I started a company called Bellis. Today, we're supposed to talk about challenges, so I can't go into all of the details of how we build out our assessments, but I wanted to just pick 3 major challenges to hopefully shed some light on what it takes to build the kind of assessments we focused on. So Bellis is working to raise the floor for what kids learn and how they learn in high school by changing the incentive system that drives what people teach in high school, particularly college admissions assessment, since college is the end goal of our system. So to start off, just wanted to set out with some of the first principles that our team committed to early on. The first being that our tests were going to capture deep thinking skills. And we were going to try and capture these skills independent of the usual layer of content mastery of did kids learn biology or physics or chemistry or history in order to get at skills like critical thinking or problem solving. We were interested in doing that from the get-go. The problem is actually translating real-world experiences where people are doing problem-solving skills into an abstracted notion or definition is really hard. So we started where everyone starts in assessment development, which is kind of more on the theoretical side of taking the set of constructs that have been written about in the literature for the last 50 years around problem-solving skills and trying to create some workable model that could be the basis for our assessments. But we wanted to go from this really abstract, esoteric notion of what problem solving involved to something that was more practical. So we've been working for the last 3 years on a problem solving assessment with corporate partners, one notable one being McKinsey & Company, where people do problem solving day in, day out. We're working to translate the nature of their work, plus the literature review and the grounding in theory, into an abstracted natural world environment like this one, where applicants to a job or students who are applying to a school would be placing a set of animals and plants in a natural world ecosystem. I can't go into all of how we do that because we don't have time, but on our website, we go in painstaking detail into how we do that, so I encourage you to check it out. But as we were working on building these scenarios in the natural world serving as a really nice, accessible context, no matter what people studied or where they grew up, we realized that people would set out to cheat on our test, just like they do all other college admissions assessments. And today I want to focus on a particular type of cheating that we chose to try and tackle in a different way. In our case, it was more the kind of coaching of studying for the test and learning how to game it through prep. We didn't want that last mile test prep to ever overshadow what students actually achieved or learned during school. So we focused on this question of, should we either build our tests and try and lock them up in a fortress, the way most of the traditional high-stakes assessments are treated today, or could there be another way? Could we take a scenario like this ecosystem placement one, and could we take advantage of the fact that our simulations all feed off of really granular data? Could we change that data for every person every time so that our test was constantly different? Now, for anyone familiar with assessment, this presents huge challenges when you need to equate assessments, proving that a Form A and a Form B are virtually the same, and that any test taker should be indifferent to the form they receive. So we figured that doing this en masse with thousands or hundreds of thousands of versions of these tests in a real kind of difficulty distributions type setting, which is how most equating would be done out in the field, would be impractical for us. We had to find a computational way to take an assessment like this one, where an invasive species is trying to reach this native plant that you see on the screen, where users are able to modulate the underlying terrain, the path of the invasive species, the defenders that can be placed. We had to figure out a way to equate a test like this entirely computationally. So a lot of our focus at Bellis has been on using AI to drive this notion of how do we test and prevent cheating? Can we build bots that mirror human heuristics that we've studied from watching how people go through our tests and listening to their cognition? And can we actually apply that to the challenge of saying this version of our test is about the same difficulty as this other version? So we've built the equivalent of what you see here, which is basically a bot going through 9 versions of that invasive species game. And we're tracking on different scores or features that we'd be paying attention to during gameplay, how well these bots that are programmed to have human-like heuristics are performing. As we explored building more and more permutations of our test, another challenge arose for us, which was how do you drive development costs down so that you can actually have thousands of versions of these assessments that have different objects, plants, animals, environments, et cetera, so that we have a broader canvas to work from. So Bellis started working on a series of libraries for UI and telemetry and scores and things that could serve as really modular engines so that our entire R&D team could be focused on how do we build engines, not how do we build outputs. So we built primitive tools like this that will probably open source in the next year or so. But that was kind of simple. The harder part of bringing costs down was really around the graphics. And I know everyone's somewhat related to education. Usually educational games look terrible. We have a lot of folks on our team who are from AAA gaming backgrounds who wanted the look and feel of our worlds to feel like that, what Gen Z would expect at home if they were just playing a game on their console. So we started working on a system where we could have a series of zones that could divide up any of our ecosystems and environments and allow them to populate in a procedural way, meaning entirely computationally, instead of having humans handcraft these scenes. All of our videos are broken today, so I don't think you're actually going to get to see what they look like, maybe on the screen. But you'll get to see that there's a real difference between the types of scenes that generate, which should reflect the procedural rules of our world, but also what users actually choose as they're going through the assessment. So a scene could look more like that one, or never mind, it's not going to look like this one. But it's quite different. You can kind of get a sense. In the process of building out this procedural engine, we figured out that the actual cost center was in the 3D assets themselves. So one of the things we've been working on for the last 3 years is the ability to take any input image, like this one, to estimate the position of the 3D point clouds of that input image in 3-dimensional space. This is using a special type of neural net called a generative adversarial net. And to then morph a training model in our data set to take the form of the 3D point cloud so that we get the smooth topography that an artist would be used to working with. And from there, we're able to borrow an animation from another model in our training data and to piece that together with the texture that we started with from the input image. And basically what you get is a fully baked 3-dimensional model for free with no artists involved. So we've been able to achieve this huge economies of scale, not just with fish, in scenes like this, but also with mammals. So here's an example of a bear that we've generated. And you can kind of see we borrowed an animation from this wolf, which was in our training data for our neural nets. and then we're able to produce a full sniffing and howling bear, if you'd ever want one. So the end target for us is scenes that look and feel like this, so that our kids find assessments engaging, and so that all of the testing providers in the high stakes and summative assessments space are able to hopefully drive down their development costs for this kind of assessment to become mainstream. Thanks.
I'm going to stand up. Is that okay? Excellent. Tired, alone, scared, angry, invisible. That's how many young people feel, not in the streets, but in their schools and in their workplaces. I myself am no exception. As a kid from Queens, I had big dreams to be a baseball star. But instead, I landed on the 38th floor of Goldman Sachs. Go figure. But it didn't look like a baseball team when I showed up at Goldman. And the leaders weren't Pedro or Big Papi. They were now Bezos and Gates. The big companies like Goldman were losing out on talent because they didn't have diverse teams. So on Monday mornings when I showed up to work, and my colleagues would talk about weekend getaways to Cape Cod and the Hamptons, I struggled to relate, so I quit. But I'm not alone. The professional of color dropout rate is very real. When looking at young people, especially racially diverse young people, they are 3 times more likely to quit their jobs compared to their counterparts. 3 times more likely. So you bet, it's no surprise, this is costing corporate America $30.5 billion per year. Sounds like a big challenge, right? And it is. So this is what we're here to talk about today. I am the co-founder of Forefront, a corporate education company that supports businesses like Goldman Sachs retain and advance their diverse talent through online and in-person workshops and trainings. The leading reason young people like myself quit their jobs is not because they left for another job. It was because they felt a lack of sense of belonging at work. This is cited 37% of the time, and that's 2 times more likely to be the reason that that young person quit their job compared to being recruited away to another company. So let's talk about what we can do so we can lower that number. I want everybody on the count of 3, don't think about it, to scream their name. You ready? 1, 2, scream your name. 3. Excellent. Thank you so much. The first thing that we can do is invest in more experiential and peer-led diversity training. My name is Josue. It's a hard name to pronounce, right? But imagine how I would feel if you knew how to say it right. Imagine how I knew how I'd feel if I show up in the meeting and you said my name, and you made that effort to understand it. That's just one small example, but there's so many ways we can live to that reality in our workplaces. And this is important. If you look at the human genome, 20 years ago there was a report from the Human Genome Project that said that at the DNA level, all people are 99.99% the same, yet 0.01% different. That means that everyone in this room is 99.99% identical, but at the DNA level, we're also 0.01% unique. How can we drive workplaces where we can embrace that 0.01 that makes us different? So moving right along, number 2 is understand the past but redefine the future. I want everyone to close your eyes very quickly and think about the year 2030, where you will be, what are you doing? All right, come back to reality. When we think about the future, and you Google future of work, you're bombarded with images of robots taking over the world, and robots leading the charge. But the future of work is more than AI, VR, and all their acronyms. The future of work is human. When you look at demographics in the United States, by 2050, the United States will be, quote unquote, a majority minority country. We are experiencing a rapid growth of Asian and Latin populations that will forever change the face of talent in the workplace. So what are we doing to get ready for this future of work? Are we being focused on the future and redefining it? And from a global perspective, almost exclusively, all population growth in this world will come from the continent of Africa. When you look at available talent, what does that mean to you? So the third thing that we can be doing is now focus on sponsorship. Raise your hand if you know what sponsorship is. We have less than 10% of the room raise their hand. Raise your hand if you have a sponsor. Just about the same. You might have a sponsor and might not know it. 81% of professionals of color need navigational support to advance their careers, but receive it less compared to Caucasian men. When you look at Latinos in the workplace, only 5% of Latinos have sponsors. So let's illustrate very quickly as we wrap up what creating sponsorship scenarios in the workplace means. I'm going to ask for 3 volunteers very quickly. I need one person who's brave enough from behind me to stand here in the front. Excellent. Your name is?
Saad.
Saad. We're going to play not Simon Says, Saad Says. Everyone's going to do as Saad, every move that Saad does, you're going to follow it. All right? One more. Excellent. Thank you, Saad. Give it up for Saad. Now I'm going to need 2 more volunteers from our group. 2, and you're going to need another one. Okay, you know how to play rock, paper, scissors? Yep. Excellent. And your name?
Rebecca.
Rebecca?
David.
David. So this is Team Rebecca. This is Team David. They're going to do a best out of 3, and you're going to cheer them loud and hard. Rebecca, David. On a count of 3, let's go. 1, 2, 3. All right, one more. Seems like Rebecca won. So why are we doing this silly game? Well, there has real implications. You see, when Saad came here and told you what to do, he was being a mentor. He was saying, you show up at 12 o'clock wearing shine shoes with a resume that looks this way. But when you had Rebecca and David here, and they were battling it out, perhaps for the next promotion, you were sponsoring them and saying they deserve a shot and they should win, and I'm going to advocate for them. So that's the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And young people, especially young people of color, drastically don't have enough of them. So to wrap up, number 1 thing is investing in more peer-led and experiential diversity training. Number 2, understanding the past, but redefining the future. Number 3, creating sponsorship scenarios, not just mentorship. Here are 3 things you can do when you leave this room. So what does this mean to you? The workplace is changing. In 10 years, millennials will be 3/4 of the workplace. Millennials are 50% people of color. And by 2050, there will be no racial or ethnic majority in the United States. And companies that have diverse talent make 30% more money than their counterparts. And in closing, right now, today, you may feel it might be hard to make all of these things a reality. But the news I have for you is that actually it's possible. And we can move past the headlines that get bombarded in our newsfeed day in and day out. And we can make it. It's happened before. Ken Chenault was the CEO of American Express. Ursula Burns was the first black woman CEO of Xerox. Everyone here can make sure that the young person in your workplace can be the next Ken or Ursula. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon.
I'm really happy to be here with you today. My name is Jennifer Gazoo, and this is my colon. It's not my actual colon, because that would be really gross. It's a diagram, and it's from my surgeon, Dr. Onabeni, from 2 years ago when I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. I had to have surgery and then chemo. And I won't go into the details, but the surgery was conducted by 3 robotic arms. And the chemo I received from a small pump in a fanny pack that fed into a port right in my chest. 2 full days a week, it would circulate. And I called it chemo to go, because I would take it with me. It was intense. I'm here today, so clearly this story has a happy ending. But at the time, the way that I dealt with all this was to throw myself into my work. And I had the very good fortune of being able to work from home during this time. I previously had traveled quite a bit, but with the chemo, I couldn't get on a plane with a fanny pack full of toxic chemicals. So I had to hunker down and take my meetings via the magic of video conference in my pajama pants. Raise your hand if you've ever done this. Okay, so you know. It was a time where I really learned a lot about virtual learning and remote work, and I want to share that learning with you today. I work with a nonprofit called Big Picture Learning. We are activists for change, and our arena is in education. The work that we do is incredibly difficult. We work with some of the most underserved students in the country. I love it. It is literally sometimes blood, sweat, and tears, and it's hard to do that work over a computer screen. Before I got sick, I had been asked to take on a project to move some of our coaching resources and tools into an LMS so that we could support through online learning. And when I was doing the discovery for this project, when I would speak to people about it, they would say things like, "You can't do what we do online." And even as I was taking on this project, I think that was my belief as well. Up to this point, I had taken online courses, I had students who'd taken them, and the experience that I had, I would say, was anonymous or inauthentic. Young people would use the word boring. But in these months when I was in my pajama pants in my home office, it was really my lifeline, and I had a very different experience. And I found it to be warm and responsive, and I want to talk about some of the ways that that happened today. This is Anna. She's my colleague at Big Picture Learning. We've worked together for about 2 years, but we've only been in the same space for maybe 7 days altogether. You can see from these snaps, these are just various screen grabs from Zoom recordings. Anna really lets her personality shine through, even on the computer. And the months that I was in chemo, we talked a lot. She asked me a lot of questions. And I was in a pretty vulnerable space, but it allowed us to really build a bond together, even though we weren't in the same place. And she sent me care packages. She asked a lot of questions. She really took care of me virtually. And it's pretty great that now I get to do the same for her, because she's having her first baby in a couple weeks. And I've been sending her care packages, and I've been asking her questions. But because we had this personal space together, we really had a different experience of relationship building, and that really helped to deepen our work as well. We have a lot of webinars at Big Picture, just about every week, and we host them on Zoom so we can see the faces of the folks who join us. Our students, our teachers, our administrators, and we often even have folks who join us from outside of our network. Because we do them on Zoom, often we see this flash of fear as people show up and realize they're on camera. Because when we come to a webinar, we really expect it to be transactional and anonymous, and we're going to scarf down our lunch and watch someone do a PowerPoint, but that's not how we do things at Big Picture. We ask a lot of questions, and we really listen. And the work that we do is to address the needs of the folks who are coming to join us. It is a major connection. And we've found that we're going to break this cycle best by not giving people the opportunity to just show up as consumers. So one of the things that we always try to do as well is to have some fun. We do a lot of engaging and entertaining activities in our webinars as well. These are my boys. And this is the part where I tell you that I've been NED for over a year, which is no evidence of disease, and I've been back on the road. But I want to tell you that most of my learning about this work of learning online is from this guy, who's my 10-year-old son, Francis. Francis loves YouTube. And I work with teachers, and when I ask them what their students are interested in, they throw their hands up and they complain. All these kids want to do is watch videos on YouTube or play Fortnite. And I think that's actually really great, because these are spaces where they are creating, they are playing, they are learning, and they're building relationships. Francis doesn't care how many viewers a YouTuber has or how many subscribers. He cares if he can learn something from them, if they're going to make him laugh, if they'll engage with him in his comments and answer his questions. These are ways that he finds these interactions empowering, and he's doing real learning. I think too often when we talk about online learning, we measure in terms of scale. We're only talking about the numbers. How many users, how many students, how many viewers? And we're missing an opportunity to really talk about impact. How are we changing hearts and minds? How is this work important? How are we really connecting with the people who are coming to join us in this virtual space? My oncologist, when I would ask him, I would freak out about survival statistics, and he would say, those numbers have nothing to do with you. Your N size is 1. And that's what we have to think about in this space as well, is who is that person on the other side of the screen? Really find ways to authentically connect. In all of this work and learning, I think the things that have stood out to me the most are that you get out of online learning what you put into it. You get out of remote work and virtual collaboration what you put into it. And if you can create a space for your team or your users where they can really be themselves, where they can play, where they can be heard, and where you will follow through, that's how you create a real human work environment, whether you're online or offline. Thank you.
I'm going to stand up as well, so thank you for setting the precedent, Jose, right? All right, I'm Saad Khan, Director of AI and Machine Learning at ACT. Great to be here with my fellow Trekkies. I'd like to talk today about Elevate, an AI-based tool to help learners develop elevator pitch communication skills. The design and development of which has been the culmination of a personal journey. You see, growing up in Pakistan, the one thing my parents made sure they drilled into me was that education is the key to success. And it worked. With the support of my parents and teachers, I did well at school. Good grades seemed to open doors, such as admissions into competitive colleges. And with that developed a sense of empowerment. Eventually, I did well enough to win a fully paid scholarship to study in America, a dream come true. With some more luck and hard work, I earned a PhD in machine learning and said to myself, that's it, I'm made. All I have to do now is present my well-polished resume and those high-paying jobs will just rain down on me. Well, then I had my first real job interview. Now, I was fully prepared to talk about the complex mathematical models and the fancy projects that I'd worked on, but the hiring manager had other ideas. What value do you think you bring to my organization, he asked. I didn't know where to begin. Needless to say, I bombed that interview. But my experience isn't unique at all. You see, our educational systems simply do not prepare students well enough for enterprise skills and soft skills. Skills such as communication and teamwork are overlooked in favor of math and coding. But you know what? The skills needed to be successful in the modern workforce are rapidly changing. AI and automation continue to absorb mechanical tasks such as truck driving. And occupations that rely heavily on abilities such as creativity and problem solving are rising. So with that context, it's no real surprise that excellent communication skills are a sought-after ability. In particular, elevator pitch skills, the ability to communicate effectively in time-pressured, high-stakes scenarios, such as job interviews or pitching to a bunch of VCs, is a key ability that can have a lifelong impact on achievement and opportunity. But how do you develop this specific skill? What sort of feedback, what sort of tools are available to learners? Turns out there isn't much out there, so I decided to build one myself. It starts with a model for what really makes for a good pitch. Because you've got very limited time to get your message across, it's important to follow a simple structure. Catch the attention of the listener. Explain to them how what you offer helps them achieve their goals. And close with a call to action, what you need from them, perhaps a follow-on meeting. But just as important as structure is form and delivery, in particular, nonverbal communication skills. The right gesture at the right time, making eye contact, intonations in speech, using breaks and silences appropriately, having an enthusiastic tone of voice, and of course, confidence. So we're using this model to design a deep learning architecture that combines audiovisual data of learners practicing pitch skills with theory-driven delineation of the pitch construct to provide both automated feedback for learners to actually learn from. This forms the backbone of a prototype that we built called Elevate. Now, Elevate allows learners to practice pitch skills in a variety of scenarios and then review feedback generated both by the AI as well as human experts. Whether it's a college student working with a college admissions officer, a job candidate preparing for an interview, or a young entrepreneur raising funds for a startup, Elevate can help develop the right communication skills to get the job done. And now as I conclude my talk, I'd like to get back to my personal trek. I failed at my first job interview, but I learned from the experience and eventually did well. ACT even made the ill-advised decision to hire me as the director of AI. My mom, who lives back in Pakistan, is proud of me. But she never misses an opportunity to remind me that while I have a PhD, I'm not the right kind of doctor. I guess there's nothing like tough love to keep you motivated, right? All right, folks, thank you very much for your attention. Send me an email if you'd like to learn more. And while we're here at ASU GSV, feel free to reach out the old-fashioned way.